Woodman here with another message for you involving a critical examination of power dynamics across the globe, resource exploitation, and the impact of these forces on indigenous peoples as well as overall global stability. So, I want to break some of these ideas down. Firstly, let's begin with gold, oil, and diamonds. G.O.D, aka God. Gold, oil, and diamonds have become the god of certain elites in our world. These resources have historically been highly valued due to their economic and industrial uses. Gold represents wealth and currency, oil is crucial for energy and transportation, and diamonds are associated with luxury and status. The impact has been that the pursuit of these resources has often driven significant geopolitical actions and conflicts influencing national policies, international relations, and economic systems. Primarily, there was a lot of seizing of lands, colonization, and outright oppression of different world countries. What about the false god concept itself? Well, by definition, in this context, the false god refers to the idea that the pursuit of these resources, gold, oil, and diamonds, has become an idol to global leaders of the world. And this becomes a destructive sociopathic behavior and priority which goes against the world interest. The concept would critique how the quest for these materials can overshadow ethical considerations as well as basic fundamental human rights. In terms of the impact on the world, the relentless drive for these resources has led to environmental degradation, exploitation, conflict, contributing to global instability, uh, the oppressive nature of colonization, and the destruction of our world's ecosystems. So let's veer a little bit to the elites and the control that they have. The elites themselves are self ordained world leaders based on the countries they represent, but there's a lack of sincerity. By definition, this refers to the perceived insincerity of these elites, those who hold significant power and influence, who might prioritize their own interests or their own national interests over the well being of others. In terms of impact, these elites may act with strategic duplicity, presenting themselves as benevolent while really pursuing agendas that benefit from them at the expense of others. In other words, I'm sure we have seen the meme where a country is asking for help and being told that no, there's no help available to give, but when the country mentions their valuable resources in the form of gold or oil, suddenly some resources have become free and available. The term effective colonizers suggests that modern elites engage in practices similar to historical colonialism, right? Exploiting and dominating other countries to their own exclusion for their resources. The impact is that the control often involves economic manipulation, political influence, and military intervention. In other words, if you keep a third world country poor, how will it ever fight back? And this leads to the subjugation of different nations and the exploitation of their own resources. I mean, let's think about the fact that Haiti was once dominated by the United States. It was literally occupied for several decades before they finally released control. So, by definition, this implies the use of fear, violence, or coercion to maintain control over other nations or regions, often justified by the need to secure resources or strategic advantage. So, going back to the United States control of Haiti scenario, the U.S. Marines instilled absolute fear because if there was any kind of uprising or rebellion, it would be quickly crushed, people would be made examples of, executions would be public. So now let's go into manifest destiny and indigenous oppression. In terms of manifest destiny, by definition, historically manifest destiny was the 19th century belief in the United States that it was destined to expand across North America, and this often came at the expense of many indigenous peoples. If we also think of Great Britain, we can think of the fact that it was an empire and that the sun never sets on the British Empire, meaning that their reach was everywhere. The impact, based on this ideology, justified the displacement, disenfranchisement, destruction, and often violent treatment of indigenous peoples. And that can occur through a variety of ways. Think about the fact that we once gave blankets laced with smallpox to Native Americans. Decades of oppression. By definition, the long-term consequences of manifest destiny include systematic marginalization, cultural destruction, and socioeconomic disadvantages, which are faced by many indigenous communities. The impact is that this ongoing oppression is manifested in loss of land, disruption of traditional ways of life, and socioeconomic disparities that persist today. You'll note that it's not easy for someone to just go into a country like China and just simply say, I'm going to buy up all the land. But in a third world nation, you often find that there are very weak systems in place that allow other countries and their businesses to come in and quickly buy up land and exploit the entire country to the detriment of their citizens. Resource exploitation. Resource-driven conflicts are very common. The quest for gold, oil, and diamonds often leads to conflicts and exploitation, particularly in regions rich in these resources. This exploitation can be carried out by powerful entities or nations seeking to control these assets for economic gain. Now, of course, we do have the different international treaties of the United Nations, but how fully are these enforced? And in fact, when you have larger powers that can disproportionately throw their weight around, isn't even effective. Let's talk about colonial and neo-colonial practices. In a historical context, traditional colonialism involved the direct control and settlement of territories. Modern neo-colonial practices involve economic and political dominance without the need for formal control, often driven by resource needs and corporate interests. In other words, if the business controls the region, we don't need to necessarily have a controlling government because by virtue of the fact that the elites of that country are in fact the most powerful, what can be done to resist? So here's where you have resistance and resilience. Now, many peoples have often resisted these oppressive forces, fighting for their rights, their sovereignty, and the preservation of their cultures. The struggles highlight the broader issues of global inequity, global inequality, as well as the need for environmental justice. The environmental impact, of course, has been the degradation of several things, right? Because the pursuit of resources can lead to severe environmental damage, including deforestation, pollution, and climate change, which disproportionately affects vulnerable communities and ecosystems. Think about the fact that DDT was banned in the United States, but in fact, it was being sold in increasing amounts to Latin America and South America and Central America. In other words, by going to countries with weaker systems, these businesses were allowed to continue to propagate illegal products into the world market, and therefore the people who were then in these countries, would suffer from the ill health effects of it, right? Because DDT has a problem with making people sterile. So these destructive behaviors eventually, they sort of contribute to this global instability and result in overall exploitation, where these elites get to exercise power with a lack of sincerity, engaging in modern forms of control that perpetuate global injustice. Destiny has, in terms of the manifest destiny, has led to the oppression of indigenous peoples, long-lasting impacts on their cultures and societies. Understanding these dynamics highlights the interconnectedness of resource exploitation, power, and human suffering, emphasizing the need for more ethical and sustainable practices in global governance and resource management. In other words, we need real rules where the countries are truly managing the undue use of power across the globe. But in fact, we don't really have that now because it seems like might makes right and the man with the gold makes the rules. We just have to be careful in all of this to remember that we cannot succumb to this false god because this false god is just as bad as Satan himself. I hope this message reached you and that you found it very informative. If you're new here, you're welcome aboard. You're in a safe space. If you're returning, I thank you for your support. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much. I love you all. Have a wonderful and blessed day. Take care.